Whereabouts are we? Oh, there we go. We're back. Oh, how about that? Hey guys, I am your humble local dungeon master, Joshua MacGregor. And here we are, we're back with the Roll Insight videos. It was a toss-up as to when I was going to do more of these, and even at a certain point, if I was going to do more of these. But pardon me, they're a lot of fun and they help me organize my thoughts, and one or two people even might watch them, which is healthy for a YouTube channel where I'm interested in growing everybody's voice and giving us a platform and creating an entertaining environment for you guys to watch. So if you are watching, welcome and thank you. Today we are going to be discussing the first episodes of two of the three Race to the Battle of the Bands campaigns, the Mockeries and the Reserve List. Obviously, the narcissistic tendencies, I have not done my vocal warm-up for the day, the narcissistic tendencies have their first episode hopefully going live on Monday, but I'll talk a little bit more about this, but I DM these two that I'm going to be talking about, and so I can speak much more on those than I can on a game that I'm not even in. Although Neil and I do catch-ups and talk about what we've done, and but as far as being an audience member goes, I'm right there with you. When it goes live on Monday, I will be so excited to see what that band is up to, because they're very different. All of the bands are very different. So, so let's talk a little bit about this process. Let's talk about starting new projects. Race to the Battle of the Bands was originally going to be a fun sort of interim side project in between God Heist and 10th Kingdom, which 10th Kingdom is the second season of the God Heist. And the more we talked about it, I think it was actually during one of these Roll Insights, I think it was during the talkback for God Heist, that the idea was floated that there could be multiple bands in competition with one another. And the idea of like going off and having like consecutive storylines that explore this country in this fictional world, which I've created, Cygalia, or the country rather is Gorendia. They're all Ias. Yes. Anyway, something with hindsight I might have done differently in the naming of the things, but it's fine. The idea was floated, and the two bands were put together. The original two bands were Neil's first game and my first game, which was the Reserve List. And we put those games together, and we started. The idea was to bring in a bunch of new players to the game, and especially new creatives who we wanted to work with and we thought could tell amazing stories together with. And also, if you play Dungeons and Dragons and you have fun with the game, you know that you're constantly trying to get other people to play with you, especially if you like those people. So Neil and I got together a list of all the people we played with on Wednesdays and a bunch of new players, some of which Neil knew or put out word that he wanted new players to join in. That's actually how I met Neil. It's lovely, the social media, the Facebook aspect, the fact that you can go on these D&D groups and say who wants to play Dungeons and Dragons, and 9 times out of 10 you end up with a group of just fantastic, wonderful people. Neil and Morgan and through them Jim, and then Ralph, and I could keep saying names, Mike and Hugo. All these people have become incredibly good friends of mine, and we all met because Neil put a thing out on Facebook. So that was wonderful. and some people that I knew as well were invited. You will recognize some of them in the reserve list. Leone, Miranda, and Julian were they're all cool actor people, and Leone hooked us up to do some acting stuff because we're all acting folk, acting and writing people, and so there is no better fit, in my opinion, for Dungeons and Dragons and improvised storytelling than people who are used to working that muscle in their brain, who are actors and writers. Not that people who aren't can't be incredible D&D people, but it's a similar muscle, and if it's already trained, then people immediately know what to do, and they did. They proved that much. So even though the order these were released in was the Mockeries and then the Reserve List. Reserve List was filmed first and actually had a good 2-week head start on the Mockery. So let's talk a little bit about how this sort of developed, and then I'll talk about the Mockeries afterwards. So the Reserve List, originally we had 5 people. We had Leone, Miranda, Julian, Ralph, and Alberta. Phenomenal cast. I could not be happier with that. So we had a couple of sessions where we were doing character creation and starting to explain the initial rules, which is a lot, especially to do over Zoom. I can't quite overstate that, is trying to go through the particulars of Dungeons and Dragons rules without being able to open the player's handbook with that person in the room makes it remarkably more difficult. And it was in the evening, and we'd already been going for an hour and a half, and we were all pretty tired. But in order to sort of give people sort of more of a practical idea of what the game was, because I know from my own experience that once you get people used to making skill checks through the core loop of the game, that's the simplest thing to understand. And once that clicks, a lot of what the game is starts to make more sense. But that's only if you start playing, right? So we had our first, it was sort of a 30, 40-minute thing where we did like sort of the band being assembled by Miranda's character, Isabin, who's such a good character. I cannot overstate how much I love these characters that these guys came up with. And starting them out with Miranda and Julian started off with rogue characters, which is a very fun, flavorful class that feels very useful to any story and is also quite simple. I mean, sneak attack is the least simple part of it, and sort of getting your head around that. But it's one of the more martial classes and doesn't involve spellcasting, so that was a good one to go with. But the result was that we ended up with a very skewed party balance, which is 2 rogues, a ranger, and a wizard, which is fantastic, especially because this, unlike God Heist, which is very sort of can go to quite dark places, be very high stakes, sort of deals with cosmic level stuff. These were always meant to be lighthearted. Sort of the premise was a touring band meets Scooby-Doo. Was how we pitched these to everybody, actually. But that's how we sort of got hyped for it ourselves, Neil and I. And so for a lighthearted, sort of misfitted characters in this band way, this was perfect. And it will continue to be perfect. And I'll just address this in terms of like, oh, well, it's a band and there are no bards in the band, or this is meant to be an adventure party and you only have one primary spellcaster and no healing. I mean, rangers can do a little bit of healing, but we'll put that aside for a second. I just want to address it. the thing about that is I truly believe it depends on the kind of story that you want to tell. Uh, in terms of party balance and all of this stuff. No, they're not bards per se, but also canonically, also canonically, they're not good musicians. If you're doing a story about a band getting together and they're immediately good, that's fine. And we'll talk about that. That happens to be the case for the Mockeries. But I think for the reserve list anyway, the story that's going on there, a story about people who aren't necessarily musicians but want money getting together to win a cash prize in a band competition and ending up gradually becoming better musicians because of it. That feels like a powerful story to me. And I think this ragtag group really works well for solving mysteries, which is the second half of what that premise is. Two rogues, a ranger, and a wizard. You can investigate literally anything. You can investigate tracks and nature-based stuff, arcana-based things from the wizard, and the rogues can like get you in anywhere and do investigation checks. It's all good, is what I'm saying. So the story we're telling is perfect for that. And in terms of, I'll address the no heals thing, because the idea was to bring in a lot of new players, it was always going to gradually build to the point where we were doing combat, but not necessarily quickly. We don't necessarily need to get to combat very, very fast. Once everybody is as comfortable as possible, that is when we will get to combat. So for all of those of you who don't see a lot of combat in this series, that's the reason why, is because it's also the first time a lot of these people are playing. And if you remember the first time you played Dungeons and Dragons, maybe you don't. Maybe you started when you were 4 and you were weaned on this stuff. I started 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. And I very freshly remember not knowing all of the rules and mixing some of them up and needing time to get used to all of this stuff, and people being very patient with me. So that's the same courtesy we have to give to everybody else. Right, so we filmed that first one, that first like 30-40 minutes of the band getting together, and then we do this every 2 weeks. We film this. Here's an insight. Let's do the actual insight roll. Insight roll for this thing. Here's the die. 12. I think that's about as good as we've ever gotten on this channel for the roll insight gimmick. 12. Behind the scenes, we film this fortnightly. Not the Battle Royale, which spells the word wrong, but every 2 weeks. We film these. So 2 weeks later, we got together and we filmed the first real session, which slowly builds from people hanging out in a bar to sort of the main thing happening. The first minor spoilers for these first couple episodes, I suppose. The ghost of Percival Windbrand appearing and sort of the hook of the story. For that episode, we did not have Miranda. We had a scheduling conflict where Miranda could not show up for one of those episodes, which was a bleeding shame. But so we had the hook, and then Miranda joined us for the resolution, which I split into 2 parts, which will be coming in the next 2 weeks. We get episode 2, which involves them going to Madame Mad's augury auction, and then episode 3, where they bring the mystery to a close. And then we've just started filming the second mystery in the next town. So fun stuff is going on there. And when we get to that, I'm I will talk more about gradually raising stakes in storytelling, because it's one of my favorite things to do is to build stakes up from something quite mundane up to the big stuff. And that's the other thing I want to address, is that these two that I'm doing and the one that Neil is doing, they're all connected. They're set at the same time in the same country, but are going to be having different focuses. So the reserve list focus is they are sort of going south, and maybe they'll go east, maybe they'll go west, but they're definitely going south of the capital. And they are going to encounter different forces that are at work as the story goes on than the other ones will. So there is incentive for you to watch each of them, not only because of the incredible improv and fun moments and shenanigans involved and the sort of episodic nature of the mystery of each individual one, but there are hints at interconnected stuff between all of them. So that's fun. And eventually they're going to meet up. And that's the other thing that we have not yet figured out. But we will. We know that we can get 2 groups together for sure. It's getting 3 together that's like, I don't know if we're going to do that. We might round robin it, if that makes sense. In any case, let's and then so in total we filmed 3 sessions for the first mystery of the reserve list, and we've just filmed a 4th, so we are well on our way to going forward. Let's move on to the mockeries. I was doing some work for a project which I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about yet, just because it's not done, and I don't want to start any hype trains rolling too quickly. But I'm doing an acting gig, which involved some voice work, and I got to work very closely with Callum, who was doing the sound. He was doing the recording and the sound design on this separate project that has nothing to do with this channel. And I was expressing how much fun it was to be doing the God Heist and the Reserve List. And Callum said, "Oh, well, I have heard of Dungeons and Dragons, and I've always wanted to try it, but I've never had anybody who I could try it with." And immediately I was like, "Well, you've got to join in with our band." The thing was, originally for this Reserve List thing, Hugo and another friend of mine, Marina, were also thinking of joining in. And Hugo actually still might eventually join in with the Reserve List, which would be great. But what that meant was there was going to be a lot of players to bring Callum into. And Neil had the exact same thing, is that he had a lot of players for his game. And I have a couple of friends. I had a couple of friends that I met from university when I was at Rose Bruford College of Theatre and Performance. Daisy and her twin sister Lily, who we'd only ever played Dungeons and Dragons together one time before, but they were incredible role players and fanatical in their love for the game, just like me. And I messaged Daisy and I said, "Would you be interested if I was setting up a small game?" And we talked back and forth. It ended up being that Daisy and Lily were free on a Saturday. And so I was like, "Callum, if you want in, I've got a couple of people with relatively little experience, but incredible knowledge of the game and love for the game." And we ended up, and here's this premise. If this is interesting for you, that we could do this as part of Race to the Battle of the Bands and be a third band. And he said yes. And we got together and we did the gig at Oddmore. We did we did that first gig actually over the course of only one evening, which is why that episode's only going to be split into 2 episodes, whereas the reserve list one's going to be split into 3. So they managed to complete the mystery at Oddmore over the course of one evening. And then we have done... we've begun the next mystery. We've begun one in Merleystone, which is very exciting. And that one we will film over the course of a couple of evenings, and so that will be split over multiple episodes. So the 2 series will not necessarily be like, and every 2 episodes the mystery will be solved. It will be, as we're filming them fortnightly, the hope is that most of them will be able to split into 2 episodes so that we can stay ahead with our schedule and our release schedule, as it were. If that's not possible, if the episodes are too short, for example, I don't really want to go much below an hour 15 for an episode, then we may change the release schedule of this to be fortnightly, but or at least from my end, or release one every week, but alternate the weeks. Not sure. For the moment, the goal is to release 2 every week. One for the reserve list and one for the Mockeries. Let's talk a little bit more about the Mockeries as a band. Obviously, fewer people, so just the 3 people. But I like smaller groups of D&D anyway. I actually have a home game, which is coming to a close in the next few weeks, with only 2 players and myself. And it's wonderful to be able to get that specific and detailed into characters' backstories and motivations and depth and growth. It's actually I actually like it better having 2 or 3. 3 I think is probably an optimal number. 3 players in a game, but the 2-player game is my home game is wonderful, and actually will eventually be canonized on this channel in some form or another. We'll do some kind of content revolving around that, because it is set in the past of Cygalia, and the events are incredible and very pertinent to what's going on potentially in season 2, the 10th Kingdom. In any case, the Mockeries. You have to watch the episodes if you want to know how these how these names came out. It was glorious. The Mockeries are fantastic, and these guys came to me with characters. I worked very closely with Callum to make his, but Lily and Daisy made their own, and we worked very closely together to make sure that what they were making, what they wanted their story arcs to be with these characters, mesh well with the world that I had built. Because Yuan-Ti have very specific place and role in the world of Cygalia. They are worshippers of the Beast Lord Malar, which is not, I have adapted a lot of this D&D stuff. And Tabaxi, if you've watched the God Heist, are not actually a race on Cygalia at all, but they do show up on Vulpikar. So her being a Tabaxi, not being from Cygalia, but this being post-God Heist made that possible, and her looking for her tribe is a really interesting story arc. Thesia's goal of eating important people and becoming the champion of Malar is one that I have had a lot of fun creating situations for, and that becomes more of a thing in Merleystone, so keep watching. And then, of course, Callum's character, Theremin, who is a tiefling who sold his soul to get incredible rock music powers and gets all of his magic from his own father, who is Balzabul, who is the general and archdevil of the 7th layer of the 9 hells under Asmodeus. So this weird group who are all quite well, I mean, the what am I trying to say? The Yuan-Ti snake woman Thesia, played by Daisy, has very little to no empathy and wants to eat people as her primary motivation. Lily's character, the Tabaxi Cloud, doesn't like civilization, and it's not even from Cygalia, so her bonds are really to her people that she's trying to find. And and Theremin, played by Callum, this tiefling warlock who's only interested in gaining fame and not working very hard for it, and is quite a narcissist, form this incredible amoral group, which means the other group also actually are thieves and con artists and are amoral in their own way, which means giving people motivations like glory, fame, money, things which you know that they're going to go for, and peppering in the little things like the sanctity of human life, and other stakes which are raised later on with the reserve list and the mockeries, is a really interesting thing. Money is a great motivator, and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. If your characters have explicitly stated that they are interested in money and or in glory, band competition's a really good way to do that storyline. Like, people will be down for the mysteries that are letting them do their gigs so that they can't make money and can't gain popularity. Fine, you have to solve a mystery. If those mysteries just happen to involve the trafficking of animals, or, that's a minor spoiler, or somebody who is going to kill somebody, and you start to see people become invested in those things, and because they've been invested in saving somebody's life in the past, becoming more invested in doing so in the future. These bands starting to grow closer together as the story goes on. Amazing. It's so much fun to run these different games because the characters are very different and they're on very different journeys. I want to quickly do an appreciation run of all of the characters. Leonie dropped out of the show because she's doing amazing stuff outside of any of it, and didn't have the time, which completely understandable. Also, D&D is very daunting. So Leonie's amazing, and we're working together outside of this all the time, but she's not going to be part of that show any longer. Her character, Fretna Silverhair, was glorious. Mwah. I love that character, and I will do little cameos of her myself because she's wonderful. Nurgle Shroombeard, with his incredible disgusting air, which is so amusing, and later on Ralph does some of the most beautiful role-playing I have ever seen, and he is self-deprecating to a fault. Ralph, if you're watching this, you are wrong. You're one of the best role players I have ever had the pleasure to work with, and you help to encourage and big up the incredible plays and decisions of everybody else. So that's a huge shout out to Ralph Whiteley. Julian, coming in with Tom Barth's Jolly Snorkel, is this weird pirate who on paper isn't actually very good at anything, but really does pull through and has these incredible bits where he has this alternate persona of Lord Snorkelson of Jollymore Manor, and these incredible plays that Julian makes make him one of my favorite people to play with. He's hilarious, and uh, I wouldn't trade him for the world. Miranda playing Isabin, who has this very direct style when it comes to this character. And this character whose charisma is based in the fact that she does not compromise, and she's this very cute little person. You get more of that as the show goes on, but in terms of like negotiations and things, will just say it's my way or the highway, which I've never really seen a lot. I haven't really seen a lot of that in D&D before. This sort of charisma that's just like, you'll do what I say because I say it. And I'll go, well, what about this? And go, no, you'll do what I say because I say it. Which has made me really step back and kind of think about the way that I'm doing different scenes and doing different NPCs going forward. So good. So good. Thank you, Miranda. Alberta Saunders, who is part of my home game, one of my oldest friends, actually, one of my oldest childhood friends, who has a very similar theater rat sort of background that I do. We share a love of reading and stories and all this stuff, and she's 10 times smarter than me, which makes designing mysteries very challenging if they're going to be a challenge for her. So Alberta, you keep me on my toes, and your character of Gwen, your role playing is amazing, and the story arcs that you push me to make for you make all the stories I tell better. So thank you for that. Appreciation round continuing to the mockeries. Callum, you have an incredible amount of empathy and wonder that your character doesn't necessarily share, and a willingness to try things and try these role-playing things that are weird to start off with. I, in a recent thing that we filmed, played his dad Balzabul. We had a conversation for the first time, and he was like, and Callum was willing to go with it and go there, which is a really big deal, and also is incredibly generous to everybody else, and makes it super fun to play. Lily Grinrod, playing Cloud, has such an incredible specificity when it comes to the details of the character and the details of the role playing. Everything like deciding to be a cat person, so it's like really leaning into that, and like, do you have a tail? Great. If you have a tail, I'm going to be playing with it. It's little things like that that really bring that character off the page, and that sort of again, the cat-like role playing of, I've found something that is important to me or of interest to me, everything else gets dropped, I'm going straight towards that thing. And we'll cap off with the last but certainly not the least, Daisy, who has created this incredibly, like, actually quite terrifying snake person, who is always talking about eating people and all of this stuff, but is incredibly charming and has that sort of snake sort of hypnosis thing that she does to people, and yet with the ability to acknowledge that the others in her band are of use to her, to the point where she eventually will have to acknowledge that she can't do without them. And the plays, the use of the mechanics to facilitate the storytelling are remarkable. So to everybody who is a part of this project, whether they have left or whether they are continuing to be a part of it, I am so humbled and privileged every day to know and work with every single one of them. And these stories are going to continue to grow. The stakes will get higher. The stories will mean more to the characters, and we will do combat sessions eventually in the reserve list. So, to all of you who watch this, thank you. To all of you who watch the reserve list and the mockeries, I cannot thank you enough. It is our joy to bring those to you. And stick with us, because these will only get better with time. That is the nature of D&D live shows and D&D campaigns that you do, especially with new players, as everybody gets used to one another's play styles and personalities, and we sort of figure out what story we're telling as we go. Be sure to check out the first episode of Narcissistic Tendencies on Monday as well. Guys, take care, and I will do another one of these next week. Goodbye for now.